What if I told you that when a billionaire's yacht, mansion, or bank account gets seized, it's not just about punishment? It's a political chess move, a PR spectacle, and sometimes a fundraiser. This is Shadow Reports, where we dig below the headlines so you see the power beneath the surface. Today, government seizing billionaire assets. What really happens next, who ends up paying, and why it's rarely as clean or righteous as the news makes it seem. 1. The seizure imperative. Why states grab assets. Government seize assets to punish, deter, and confiscate value. The logic sounds simple. You break the law, you lose your toys. But in practice, getting from freeze to forfeit is a twisted road. When states freeze assets, they initially stop the owner from accessing them. Bank accounts, properties, yachts. Countries do this under sanctions, criminal investigations, or anti-corruption laws. Take Italy. Since 2022, it has frozen the assets of Russian oligarchs worth about 2.3 billion euros. Villas, luxury cars, bank deposits. But freezing is only step one. To turn those assets into state property or usable revenue, governments must navigate courts, legal claims, international treaties, and even PR backlash. 2. Freeze versus forfeit versus return. The legal maze. Here's where things get messy. There are 3 major phases. Freezing. Assets are immobilized but still legally owned by the person. Forfeiture/confiscation. The state legally takes permanent ownership, often after court rulings. Return/unfreeze. If the court rules the seizure was illegal or insufficient evidence exists, assets may be returned, often with interest or damages. In many jurisdictions, the burden is on prosecutors to prove illicit origin or misuse. The billionaire can fight back through appeals, trusts, shell companies, foreign jurisdictions. In Italy, a case involving Elisher Usmanov had a court refer to the EU's court whether it was permissible to maintain the freeze on assets worth over 80 million euros.
The government has announced sanctions against a couple of Russian oligarchs, Elisher Usmanov and Igor Shuvalov. They include a full asset freeze, a travel ban imposed against Usmanov and Shuvalov, 2 of Russia's leading oligarchs with significant interests in the UK and close links to the Kremlin. Usmanov has had significant interests in English football clubs, Arsenal and Everton. He had interest.
That is, the billionaire's legal team might argue, I don't control this anymore, even though evidence points otherwise. 3. The cost of holding is not free. While assets lie frozen, someone pays maintenance. States shoulder costs, real estate upkeep, security, taxes, insurance. Frozen properties degrade, yachts rot, luxury homes cost utilities. Italy's state property agency manages non-liquid assets frozen under sanctions, and the maintenance costs alone reportedly reached 31.7 million euros by early 2024, and may now be over 45 million euros. Think about it. The state is essentially babysitting someone else's mansion until it figures out what to do with it. For asset redeployment, from frozen to useful or sold. Once legal paths clear, states face the choice. Keep the assets, sell them, or repurpose them. None are risk-free. Some assets are liquid, bank accounts, securities, and easier to convert. Others are liquid, real estate, art, yachts. They take time and legal certainty. In some cases, states auction seized properties. In others, they repurpose them, turning villas into government buildings, museums, or selling them off. Example: Italy has seized real estate from an oligarch under investigation, Alexei Fedorksev, worth 41 million euros, including a castle at the request of Ukrainian authorities. 5. Political and diplomatic fallout. The risks. When states seize billionaire property, it rarely sits in a vacuum. Foreign governments, embassies, and courts may protest. Claims of expropriation echo. Investors watching nervously. The EU created a freeze and seize task force to coordinate cross-national legal and enforcement responses to assets belonging to persons under EU sanctions. Still, Europe is playing tug-of-war. There are talks about unfreezing 2 billion euros of assets tied to oligarch Oleg Deripaska to compensate an Austrian bank, which may set a risky precedent. 6. Sanctions evasion and legal loopholes. Billionaires fight back. Billionaires don't sleep. They deploy shell companies, trusts, loopholes, complex ownership networks. The U.S. Treasury's OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control, exposed a scheme where Deripaska attempted to divest shares in a European company, masked through proxies, to unfreeze $1.5 billion in shares. The Repo Task Force, set up across G7, EU, and other nations, works to plug these evasions. In its advisory, it warns against family proxies, trusts, third-party jurisdictions, and opaque transfers. 7. What happens to revenue? Where does the money go? You might expect to seize megavilla transforms into ambulances or school funding overnight. Reality is far murkier. Often, part of the value may go to war reparations, restitution, or sovereign debt relief. Other times, it funds state projects or goes into general budgets. In Europe, there is momentum. 3 billion euros in frozen Russian cash at Euroclear may be seized and redistributed to support Western investors or Ukraine. But every move faces legal roadblocks, ownership claims, rights to compensation, contested courts. 8. Case study: Italy's billion euro freezes. Let's zoom in. Italy has frozen assets worth euro 2.3 billion belonging to Russian oligarchs, including villas, cars, yachts, bank accounts. Authorities also seize real estate, including villas and companies, from prominent Russian figures in Milan. Italian courts have wrestled with unfreezing requests. In one case, they referred a dispute to the EU Court of Justice over Usmanov's assets controlled via trusts. Maintaining these assets is expensive. The state often demands that owners reimburse for maintenance before unfreezing. 9. Case study: U.S. seizures, yachts and jets. In America, the task force klepto capture has seized oligarch assets under civil forfeiture laws. One headline case: the motor yacht Tango, owned by Victor Vekselberg, was seized by U.S./Spain cooperation after sanctions. Other seizures: high-end aircraft, properties tied to sanctioned Russians. These are sometimes used for government operations or sold at auction. 10. The gray zone: frozen but not gone. Not all froze equals lost. Many assets remain in limbo for years. Some are partially frozen, only certain functions blocked. Some are contested. Some unsealed if the owner wins appeals. Roman Abramovich had $7 billion in assets frozen in Jersey after UK sanctions, but legal battles continue. Assets in offshore jurisdictions, trusts, or hidden webs may never get fully seized. 11. The PR show and legitimacy theater. Governments love to publicize victories, seizing yachts, mansions, because it looks tough on corruption. Billionaires fight back. Lawsuits, appeals, claims of unfair expropriation. Media plays a key role. Sensational headlines help legitimize the act. But behind that is legal cost, backlash, and diplomatic risk. 12. Ethical and legal pushback. Rights versus retribution. Defenders argue everyone has property rights, due process, presumption of innocence. Critics argue powerful oligarchs often play dirty. Seizing stolen or war-funding assets is justice. The tension: move fast, but risk violating rule of law. Move slow, but risk letting dirty money slip through. Laws vary. Some permit non-conviction-based forfeiture. You lose asset even without criminal conviction. Others require criminal due process. 13. What to watch. Trends in 2025 plus. More multilateral coordination of seizure mechanisms. EU, US, G7. Legal reforms enabling more aggressive asset confiscation, linked to sanctions. Use of frozen sovereign assets, like Russia's reserves, for reparations or structural funding. More lawsuits from billionaires pushing back. Creative evasion, cryptos, NFT, hidden shell companies. 14. Why it matters: power, precedent, and corruption. When states seize assets, they rewrite property norms. If this becomes normalized, future billionaires know their yachts might vanish on geopolitical whim. But if done poorly, it undermines rule of law and scares away legitimate investment. Seizing dirty money can be noble. Abusing it is catastrophic. So next time your news feed says government seizes billionaire yacht, don't assume justice served. Behind the headlines are court wars, political deals, maintenance bills, and PR theater. This is Shadow Reports, we pull up the blueprints behind the curtain. If you want more stories where money, power, and law collide, hit subscribe, because the game is only getting more complex, and you're not playing by the old rules anymore. Good day.